Welcome back to Risk, everyone. I'm Lee, and I have a returning guest, Mr. Dave Collum, professor, joining us today on Risk. Dave, how you been?
I've been good. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. It's the world has evolved since we last spoke.
Just a bit.
So, what is your current take on the markets? What are you seeing?
Well, as you know, I'm a perma bear. I didn't think I'd become a perma bear, but as long as the Fed are perma idiots, I'm going to be a perma bear. I think we're looking at a monstrous correction of optimistically 50% from here, and pessimistically, who knows? Solid support at zero. And I think the Fed's cornered, right? The inflation problem is going to make them have to think really hard about doing the stupid stuff they've been doing for the last, if you really think about it, it's last 30 years. And so I think they're cornered in that sense. They don't get to just print their way out of it. And if they do, then I think they're really going to lose the inflation story big time. So I think they're going to have to get tough. I think we're looking at a significant economic/market downturn sometime soon. It probably started. I had dinner with a bunch of hedge fund managers, and at least a couple of them thought it had already started. And it'll be the first downturn that I know of in which we're at the top of a business cycle and everyone's pissed off, right? So imagine that. Usually we're euphoric and how the future is so bright. We have to wear sunglasses and stuff like that, and everyone's pissed off at everything, right? And so how do you go downhill from there, right? That's a bad start to a downturn.
To make a sociological argument here, typically when you have bull markets, just like you said, at the top, everyone's euphoric and things are quite different now. And you just have to wonder, is that a sign that this really is the big one?
The final big top or a long, grueling, painful haul to who knows where, right? It could be, right? I mean, it could be a sign that this last run, what's the last run? It's either the run from, March of 2000 or the run from 2009, or the last run was totally on fumes.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I think it was. I'm just looking at my charts here. I think it was driven mostly by these stimulus checks and the Fed printing money. I think globally they were printing money like crazy.
Yeah, well, Biden tells us it's all Russia's fault, so that's good. So the world, I think what it is that we somehow thought we had gotten smarter and we had gotten less violent. And Steven Pinker says we have, but the bottom line is we have by no means shaken a society which is highly susceptible to tyrannical takeover. And if we are, it's the first time in history. So
Dave, if you look at the world objectively and population growth over the past 50 years since World War II, it has been dramatically slowed in modernized Western societies.
Right.
United States, Japan, Europe, all birth rates have been
correlates with education, right?
But they've been going through the roof in areas that are not as free. So if you're really going to objectively look at the world and decide population is too much and we need to cut back, you would think that you would just follow the model in the West and in Japan and bring prosperity to people. So it automatically happens. But that's
kind of did that. I mean, that's what we have. We've reached ZPG, as they used to say in the old days. So the average family is not having a lot of kids in the United Western world. So in some sense, we've achieved that. One could argue we're past the carrying capacity, right? You really could argue that if we don't grow population anymore, we're still in trouble. So probably 20 years ago, I used to be on a chat board that had a bunch of really serious players under funny pseudonyms and stuff. But I found out, that guy's, you might call him Yogi, but he's actually Yogi Bear, but he's actually a Fidelity fund manager, right? Or Goldman or whatever. And one of the guys there was Chris Martinson. Okay. One of the guys there was oh God, I'm drawing a blank. Come on, Wealthion. Come on, Adam Taggart. And and we were talking about these issues. We were pondering, the peak oil. I went through peak. I was on a podcast yesterday, and the guy was talking about the prepper shit that's going on now, where people are getting sort of nervous about the supply chain. We've been hearing about how we could starve, right? You see photographs from the mass starvations in places like Russia when something went bad. There's people walking down the street and there's just cadavers in the street.
Yeah,
right?
it's a terrible thought to think that could possibly happen.
Yeah, and so I'm a prepper again. So I have stashes, and people say, oh, they're listening to your podcast, going to come to your house. I go, well, the first one through the door is going to lose his life. and it's conceivable we're in for a rough ride. The other thing I did last year, I thought I detected enormous numbers of too coincidental disruptions of supply chain that were unnecessary, and in particular, energy supply. So whether it was a canceled pipeline or a hacked pipeline or an explosion in an oil refinery or a boat clogging the Suez Canal or a bridge clogging the Mississippi River, you just go on and on and on. After a while, I'm going, these are all supply chain disruptions. And it clicked that I think we're going to have a severe energy crisis. Now, what I said was it's going to be engineered. We're going to have one. It's going to be pretty soon. Mark my words. That's what I wrote in December 2021. And here we are looking at a severe energy crisis. And that's why I don't rule out the possibility that Biden and Xi Jinping and Putin are all somehow involved, because it provides a cover.
Yeah, and Ukraine is basically the energy center of Europe, isn't it?
It certainly is a shell. The other thing is the breadbasket of Europe.
Oh, of course, yeah, definitely.
The other interesting thing, remember when Huang's hedge fund, family business fund blew up?
Yeah, the family office. Yeah.
The family office, the odd thing about that one was, besides the fact that Huang was really into the scriptures, I don't just mean he was religious. I'm talking to God to get his investment ideas sort of with him. Same with Kathy Wood, by the way. And they were buddies. So there's something very strange there. But he was also, they said, sort of inexplicably unhedged. So this guy had 50 billion exposure with no hedges. Now, I'm not a hedge guy. If I think I have to hedge an investment, I'm dumping the investment. I don't need to hedge the investment. I'm dumping the damn thing. So he's unhedged. He blows the hell up. First question is, was he really in trouble? And some of the data says no. Some of the data says Goldman blew him up, period. They blew him up and dropped the entire tab on Credit Suisse and Nomura.
Wow.
The other possibility is that he intentionally blew up. And what would that be from? Well, if let's say I'm Xi Jinping and I got my economic advisors, and I say, how do we destroy the United States? How do we weaken them? They go, well, they'll give credit to any old idiot. Let's plant a bunch of Chinese implanted hedge fund types in the US system. Let's lever the living shit out of these guys. By the way, we'll make money while we do it. And then let's blow them up, right? These are like, the old suitcase nuke fears.
Yeah.
Wangs are lurking out there waiting to blow the hell up.
So basically a financial suitcase nuke.
That's exactly right. And I'm just speculating. This is just a hairy-ass guess, right? I have no data to support that except for the fact that there were parts of the Huang story that didn't fit. And when I see things that don't fit, when I see someone lying about something unnecessarily, where they lie and I go, you didn't have to lie about that. Why did you just lie? As soon as they lie, I go, up, red flag, red flag.
Yeah.
I read life hacks and deathbed regrets. Life hacks are these things where little cute tricks that make life easier. One of them is they said, open up your fridge and take a photo of what's in your fridge.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Or do the same with your cupboard. Get the store and you click open the photo and go, oh, butter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep,
life hacks. So all you need to read is 100 of those and get one good one. It was worth your effort. Deathbed regrets. I was watching Howard Cosell get interviewed and he was dying, and they started talking about his illustrious career. And he starts talking about how it all seems so stupid. I'm going, I do not want to get to that point and look back and say, what a waste.
Yeah.
I put everything through a filter that says, if this works out very poorly, will I still forgive myself? And that includes, the course of the path of my life, right? And
Well, Dave, there's no arguing that you have not lived a good life and done something very valuable for humanity.
Right. And for you guys who think I'm suffering, being a bear, that's a look off a 100-foot cliff across Kegel Lake right there in the background. So I'm not suffering. My life is phenomenal. So the deathbed regrets I read because I want to find out what the old guy who's laying on his deathbed is, looks back and says, oh shit, I should have done this. Now, I don't have the travel bug, so I'm not going to say I should have gone to Rome. I have very little interest in that. The interesting ones, of course, I always say I wish I spent more time with my family, this and that. But one person phrased it interestingly. He said, I wish I hadn't worked so much.
Yeah.
And, life is a struggle. So you do have to work. And there's times in your life you really want to work hard because it's when you're building your career and stuff. But there are also times where you just have to say, look, let it go. COVID taught a lot of people to do that. That's one of the silver linings of COVID, is that while we sat around looking over Kegel Lake, so I sheltered with my son and his main squeeze and 2 Boston Terriers, which got us to buy another because they're so phenomenal. And for about 4 months, 5 months, I can't remember, it's a blur. And we'd sit around and chat, and we'd have dinner, and we'd talk about things. And it really, for me at 66, or it was about 65 or 4 back then. It was a good time to do that. We got to sort of regroup again, right? Bring my youngest son back. My oldest son stayed with his kids and stuff like that. But I think a lot of people had that experience. So I think in part that is what the shortage of worker story is about. Only in part. But I think some people said, "Screw it, I don't want to do this anymore." I even think I see my colleagues who are glass chewers. To be an academic chemist, you have to chew glass. I'd say the average academic chemist probably puts in minimum 12 hours a day, minimum.
Wow. Okay.
And, the funny thing is, they get tenure and they just loaf. Yeah, right. Show someone who gets to set their own hours. I'll show you guys working long hours. And no, my academic colleagues work like animals. And I think post-COVID, I see the eye of the tiger missing in some of them. Not to say that they're not into it, but there's something more casual about them. And is that a loss or a win? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I will say that I spent a lot more time with my children during that time period, and
right,
some of the best times of my life. Quickly, just talking about central bank digital currencies, I've theorized for a long time that people are going to re-enter a barter economy to get around them. And I think that precious metals will play a role in that.
Do you believe in the cryptocurrency world in general, for Bitcoin?
No, I have not believed or trusted in cryptocurrency, and I'll be the first one to admit I don't fully understand it. I mean, I've done a bit of research. I had that big conference about a year ago. Michael Saylor, if you I watched his whole presentation on.
I think he's a grifter.
Yeah. No, I agree. There's theories that it's actually deep state run. The cryptos and created.
That's his theory?
No.
That's my theory, actually. Yeah, I agree with that. And in fact, the first paper written on cryptocurrencies, and they actually used the word coin in the paper. But before there was any Bitcoin anywhere, was 3 NSA guys who put it together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I haven't been able to confirm that, but I have a link to it that says that. When someone does something with Bitcoin and the FBI retrieves the Bitcoin, it's not safe.
Right? Yeah, of course. And that's been one of the things that they've used to push it on people was, it's safe, it's private. No, it's not. It clearly is not. The hodlers at times talk about, well, that's because you're using an exchange and you have to have this private wallet shit. And I go, I think that there's nothing private. There's nothing. There's nothing they can't get to. And the thing that they all seem to ignore is the idea that as soon as they say it's illegal, you're done. Yeah. And they say, oh, no. Yeah, you can still transact. And I go, so you go to the store to buy groceries, they won't take it. No.
You a car dealer to buy a car, they won't take it.
Right. Where are you going to use it?
You buy drugs from your other Bitcoin buddy. but that's it. What kind of currency is that you can't use in normal everyday life?
And if that cyber pandemic that Klaus Schwab has talked about, and they've had that cyber polygon a couple of times, just like the Event 201, ever comes to pass, all that Bitcoin and everything becomes a handwritten IOU on a paper.
Right. And yeah, it's like it's as valuable as an NFT. So we got work to do. And I'm just in defensive mode. As someone said it well, they said, we're just trying to make enough money to not be hurt by it. And if you can make enough money not be hurt by it, you can kind of just hang out. But do you think we're going to have food shortages?
Oh, I think it's a given.
Yeah, well, how we're even making cars, given how many parts there are in them and how you got to source every single part.
Yep.
At some point, it seems to me we're going to run out of inventory. And then you got the Ukrainian bread basket thing, and you got.
I was going to say it's a perfect storm for food, because not only do we have that whole Ukraine issue going on, we have China cannot feed its own population, and there is actually a theory that China is going to take over the United States to feed their population.
Well, one of the other possibilities is China's going for Ukraine.
Yeah, that could be too, but also an issue that most people don't talk about is the fertilizer shortage.
Oh my God! Oh, it's huge.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of like the perfect storm. So I mean, if you're not a prepper after the whole COVID situation and people running out of toilet paper and stuff, you're insane and you're in denial.
Well, so when we were locked down, when I first prepped, so I prepped the minute this thing showed up before anyone else panicked. I said, holy shit, I can see what's going to happen here if this goes bad. So I prepped. But then my son and his squeeze moved in with us. And so at one point I said to my wife, I said, can you guys live on a week on a roll of toilet paper? And everyone said, yeah, I can do that. And I said, there's also rags and water. And my wife says, well, didn't you prepare? And I said, well, I prepared for 2, not 4.
Right, of course. Yeah.
And then I said, let me do an inventory. And I came back and I said, well, if we each use a thing of toilet paper a week, we're going to run out in 2.5 years.
Well, that's good. You know, I went through a very similar thing. I saw those videos from China, and then I saw a news story like somewhere in the Midwest that they were like running out of toilet paper. So I went immediately the next day to the BJ's and I loaded up on toilet paper, paper towels, food, everything, and I have been keeping an inventory ever since.
I don't see how you get that. One of the things I think people ought to do is, because it's the cheapest way to do it, is buying 50-pound bags of rice. And you go, well, it's not going to taste very good. Look, if you're starving,
you'll eat it and it'll taste good. Believe me.
Yeah, get some salt while you're at it. That's the other cheapest thing in the world.
Maybe a little Tabasco sauce just to flavor things up.
Well, I bought a bunch of, bouillon and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I'm very much a prepper. And at this point, and I think it's sort of inexcusable because you could have a blackout, you could have a cyber attack, you could have an ice storm, you could have all sorts of stuff. It would be stupid to be sitting there hungrier than shit 2 weeks in because you didn't buy another 50 pounds of rice, or you didn't, right? So I've been kind of prepper mode for probably 20 years, just out of principle, that's what you should do, period.
Well, Dave, when I was a kid, my parents, they always had canned goods in the house just for that reason, if anything happened. And I think as a society, we got so used to, everything being in the supermarket all the time that we just got away from that.
And by the way, if it doesn't spook you when you go to the supermarket and you find out that some of the shelves are empty, because shelves used to be precious. So that tells you that the supply chain is screwed up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I interviewed Rudy, the Alaska prepper, a couple of weeks ago. It was my second interview with him. If you have a chance, check out his channel. He's a super guy. He lives in Alaska, but he talks about how to prep and what to do. And basically his philosophy is you prep taking what you use and you just keep rotating it. Right.
Well, that's right. The other thing that I got a bit of good advice many years ago. The guy said, don't prep in a way where things have to work out badly for you to be okay. And so I prep from the perspective of what is the cheapest way to not starve to death. what is, and you know, I don't prep. I don't need to learn how to can butter and shit like that, right? It just doesn't make sense to me. But I do know that if I can buy a 50-pound bag of rice, that's a lot of calories for no money.
Yep.
Donate it to a soup kitchen and feel good about myself. You know, I can rotate not through my own mouth, but just through someone else's mouth, right? What for the COVID thing, we bought as much protein as our freezer could hold. And you know, I bought cans of Hormel chili and shit like that because you can feed it to the dogs. Although Boston Terrier and Hormel chili would
probably not a good idea there, Dave.
they're really rancid. They're a fun factory. So I think you should do it. Period. It's not about poop. It's not about, you know, crisis. It's about just what you ought to do. Now, if you live in a small studio apartment, you can't do it. But I live in a large house with a bone dry basement. I can do it. When I walk past a 40-pound bag of rice, I go, you know, if I ever am starving, I'll feel really stupid that I walked past that bag of rice. And so I tend to just keep buying them. And if I have to, I'll feed the neighborhood, right? I mean, it's just, that's the way it works. And if I have to, I give it away. So we're heading into a weird period where this just doesn't seem that unusual. This doesn't seem.
I agree. And we should all be prepared financially and physically.
So I've been still trying to figure out the investing problem. So I was pretty light on equities, very light on equities. And then at the end of 2020, I finally came to terms with two ideas. One is that gold equities were dirt cheap, and they were on an absolute scale cheap, and that energy was dirt cheap on an absolute scale. And so I started buying equities, but I'm also afraid of the secular bear market. And what I know is that when shit sells, if you get a 70% drop in the S&P, which I believe is not only quite possible, but it gets you to fair value, in my opinion, everything sells. And so I'm balancing this, you know, energy's cheap.
Last week I interviewed Michael Oliver, and he has some perspective.
Oliver is very good. I don't know why. I still don't trust market timing, but he's top shelf.
Yeah, no. So I will. Well, he'll be on my channel. He's on my channel, so I'll send you a link to it because it's worth watching. He has a very good perspective, and he's looking at charts and momentum and all that.
And so he said, I remember he said, and some serious players think that this guy walks on water. And he said, when silver hits 25.40, it's off to the races. So I said, okay, let's pretend Oliver's spot. It seems like too many significant figures in there, right? You know, 25.40, are you sure 40? And when it passed 40, I said, okay, that's fascinating. Now we find out if this guy.
He basically argues that we've been under a long consolidation for, what is it, about a year, just around the time that COVID started.
10 years.
And what's that?
Almost 10 years. It's this big saucery thing.
Yeah, the cup and saucer. Yeah, no doubt about that. But basically, he's saying like the most recent has been a very tight range, and we've lost that perspective. But he says we're entering bull market, like significant.
Top end 500 an ounce for silver, sort of thing. Is that?
I think 260 an ounce. I think was his number.
Okay, so he's not one of the to the moon guys.
No, but I mean that was his initial target. I mean, I think he was basically using like fair value to gold.
So the silver argument to me is that silver is consumed. It's not just stored, and it's we're in deficit production. Is that correct?
From what I understand, yes.
And therefore we are whittling away the stash. And at some point, they're going to have to buy it from you and I.
There you go.
It's going to come at a price, right? Do you have exposure to the S&P 500 in any sort of normal way or no?
You know, I would have dipped in and had that like big sell-off just looking at the charts. But, you know, I think we're in short the rally mode right now. I really.
It's like, you know, dead cat, 70 body temperature.
Yeah, I think
the other interesting thing, the metals are acting like a dead-on S&P short position. oftentimes they correlate in a funny way with the S&P. They are absolutely mirroring.
At times. I mean, and Oliver actually said that, sometimes they've traded together, but now they're diametrically opposed, basically.
They really look like the S&P inverted chart.
Yeah.
And so I've had the best first quarter so far of my entire career. And I'm looking at them going, these guys are all getting the crap kicked out of them. And I'm enjoying this a little bit.
Because you're a contrarian. Sometimes contrarianism really works out very well.
Sometimes you're just the idiot, right? And I just can't afford to make a big mistake. So I'm sitting there on I still have a big cash position. And I keep asking this question, is there something you can put cash into that isn't a risk asset? And I know there's people who say, well, I think of silver as cash. I go, yeah, well, silver could cut in half, so it's not cash, right?
I don't think that will ever happen.
I hope it doesn't.
I am 100% precious metals right now, and I think I'm going to stay that way.
At $35 a barrel, and I thought he was nuts, and he was not nuts. So I just believe anything can happen. Minus 37 a barrel, right? Didn't see that one coming either. So you think silver is a good store of wealth, not just a speculative asset?
Oh, absolutely, no doubt about it, and gold as well.
Yeah, well, I have a ton of both. So if gold and silver do what's promised, the rest can go to hell in a handbasket. It doesn't matter to me. I'm sitting at 35%. Total assets and some of those assets are this house, because I bought a house that was 3 times more expensive than I needed, but I had so much cash. I said, it's going to be a great existence, as I showed you, and I have no exposure to risk. So why not just buy a nice house instead? And it'll track inflation according to Thornburg Group. And but I don't have much exposure to generic equities, and I'm trying to figure out. I like Rio Tinto. You know what Rio Tinto's dividend is right now? Sitting at 11.
Wow, that's crazy, isn't it?
PE of 5.
Yeah.
This is a tobacco stock. Now, the problem is it's a fairly recent turn. If you go back 5 years, your dividend was not that big, not even close.
Yeah.
Is that some blow off top of China's commodity demand? I just don't know. But I won't buy an equity with debt.
Makes sense.
And so I like to see cash in the balance sheet, net cash. And I like to see valuations that are historically pretty low. And I like to see a dividend payment, not just earnings. And even then, I bought this miner in Brazil, which might have been the hint. Jaguar Mining.
Okay, yeah, sure.
And again, low PE, big cash on the balance sheet, big dividend, and it's done nothing but gotten cheaper. What am I missing in a world that has no cheap assets? How can Rio?
The junior miners and the penny stocks in that space are so risky.
Well, that's the problem, but it has no debt. Is that how scam in a description that I just gave you? What's the scam?
Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, it could be some political thing that's
the
or
little part. That's the little part. I did bottom feed Russian equities about a day before they shut down.
Wow.
Not sure they're gone.
Right.
And there's some people out there who I think are desperately hoping they're not gone. Mine was truly trivial, but I wanted to go in deeper. I had a phone call with prominent Swiss money manager, and he called me and said, Dave, RSX buy it. It was about 2 weeks before they started tanking from the war. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I was sluggish at responding. I'd been thinking about RSX. I'd owned a little tiny bit, but I'd been thinking about it for about 2 years of saying, okay, it's time to, you've been watching the Russian equities for 2 years now, time to get more serious. And then I get this call going, okay, that's a nod. and then and I was just about to move, and the war shows up, and so I said, okay, be patient, and it's just dropping 20% a day, and I'm going, okay. So I was at a dinner called a founders dinner with 8 hedge fund managers and me, and I could have been the only guy who wasn't a billionaire sitting at the table, and I can assure you I'm not a billionaire. And we did the round the table at the end of the discussion, said, what's your play? And you could hear the jaws literally slam against the floor when I said Russian equities. And they said, aren't you worried about this? I go, oh yeah. But they're trading that are so dirt cheap, it's like buying a 25% junk bond.
Classic line, buy on the cannons, sell on the trumpets.
Right. So it's possible if these things start trading again that I'll have, some 75% up days on this small position.
Right.
You buy more, right, you idiot? But that's why they got cheap. They're scary.
Dave, I appreciate your time. I know you got to go.
I do. It's